I wanted to clarify a little thing around foundation models that you mentioned, Kirill, quickly in passing, but the astute listener might have really
Mhm.
latched onto, which is that you talked about in 2017 the foundation model for ChatGPT being ready, but it not being released to the public in ChatGPT until 2022. But that, of course, was it was different iterations of GPTs. So there was an original generative pre-trained
Transformer.
transformer architecture that was not super capable. Then GPT-2, that was actually open source back when OpenAI was much more open. And you can still get access to those GPT-2 model weights today. And then it was GPT-3, and particularly this RLHF, this reinforcement learning from human feedback that allowed GPT-3 to have responses much more aligned with what human users would want. That's what was released in ChatGPT, and it was pretty mind blowing in
Yeah,
2022.
it was a long journey from the original research paper in 2017 by a team at Google, interestingly, to
Oh, the transformer paper itself.
yeah, that's
Yes,
yeah,
yes, 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 yes.
yeah.
Attention is all you
But
need.
yeah, that's the one. That's the one. But yeah, so let's move on. Let's talk a bit about to finish up on foundation models. Let's talk about the life cycle. I think it's important for everybody to be at least aware of the life cycle of a foundation model. It involves 8 main steps. The first one is data preparation and data selection preparation, and basically this is like when we don't even have a foundation model. We're going from zero to all the way to an application, a business application. So a company, again, this would be like a large company like Meta or Anthropic, um, uh, Google, and so on, OpenAI. They would need to collect lots of data, and usually it's unlabeled data. We're not going to go into detail on what's labeled, unlabeled, but basically just imagine lots and lots of text if we're doing a language foundation model. The whole of the internet of text, pretty much. But it has to be curated in a certain way and prepared. So that's a very long process. Then it's also about the next step. So step 2 is about selecting the right model architecture, the right type of model. Text model versus image model, or diffusion models for images, and so on. And then building the architecture. So that's how many layers of the transformer do you have and things like that. Again, very technical. We're not going to go into detail. Then step 3 is the final step or almost final step that is done by that large company, whether it's Meta, Anthropic, OpenAI, and so on. And that's the pre-training, and that's the most time-consuming and expensive step, where lots and lots of compute is required for the model, the architecture of the model, to analyze it, to process all this text, and to learn from it. And there's like a neural network in the background that is, the weights are being adjusted, so it's getting better and better at recognizing patterns in human text or images or videos or whatever it is it's working with. And that's the part that's the most expensive, and it costs literally hundreds of millions of dollars to pre-train one of these models. And that's why these first 3 steps are not accessible to your day-to-day business. And in fact, there's no need to do that, right? Like if we were all creating our own foundation models, we'd be using so much electricity. The global warming situation would be a much bigger problem than it is. So once those 3 steps are done, the next step from here, that's when a business like yours, like one you own, operate, work in, you can take that foundation model and then you can start customizing. So that first layer of the cake is done. So now you can apply something that's called fine tuning. And fine tuning, we'll talk a lot about customization in this podcast. As I mentioned at the start, this podcast is designed to be not technical, but accessible to all kinds of audience, so everybody in the audience. And we'll talk a lot about customization, on how you can customize. But basically, one of the main ways is fine tuning, where for example, you take something like the Llama model from Meta, which is very good at just generally speaking. Just think of like ChatGPT, right? Like if you're working with ChatGPT, it can talk on all sorts of topics. But if you start asking it very specific questions about law or medicine, let's say medicine, you're asking it about a specific question about medicine, it'll be able to answer most of them, a lot of them, but very like detailed PhD level, super intricate questions on medicine. That will be hard, and especially if that is like if there's data inside your organization that is proprietary data that is related specifically to the customers that you deal with, that the model would have, there's no way of it knowing that data because it's not publicly available on the internet. So what you can do then is you can now use either medically specific journals that you're interested in that it might have not been trained on, or that specific data inside your organization, and feed it to this foundation model to further fine tune it. So it kind of narrows it down to your specific use case. And this could be medical data, it could be movie data, it could be legal data sets. It could even be the history of conversations that, or the transcripts of conversations that your company has had with its customers over the phone for the past 10 years, and how the questions they've asked, the answers that your customer service representatives have provided, and so on. And so, like, from that vastness of data, the more the better, it'll be able to narrow down. It'll be able to, it's kind of like teaching somebody who knows language, like they know how to speak, but now you're teaching them how to speak specific terms, or how to speak in a specific style of language, and it will become very good at that. And that's like fine tuning. So we'll talk a lot about this in the course. In this episode. And then after that, there's a step 5, which is evaluation. You want to evaluate. Is 2 types of evaluation. You want to evaluate how well the model is performing based on certain tests that exist in generative AI, such as the Blue test. I forget abbreviation. Bilingual evaluation. I forgot of something. Then there's the Rouge test. There's the BERT score test, and so on. There's certain tests that are more technical. And then there's also business tests. You want to also evaluate how well the model is performing against your business metrics. Like how well is it answering medical questions that it needs to be able to answer, and things like that. So that's important to be done. So you want to make sure that the model that you've created or that you've customized is fit for purpose. After that, step 6 is deployment. So you deploy them. So for now, we've created the model, but it's not you can't like use it in real life, or your team can't use it, your business can't use it. So you need to deploy it. So that means deploying, in layman terms, is like just putting it on a server or putting it on a service that's serverless, meaning that you don't have to worry about the server, but basically putting it somewhere and giving it we're going to use this term called endpoint. It's nothing super complex. I won't go into detail now. We'll talk about deployment later in this tutorial, but you'll see it's actually very straightforward. Just putting it on a server and make it accessible for other applications or parts of your business.
An endpoint is just like it's a way of allowing the foundation model application, it could be your bespoke one as opposed to just that general foundation model, but just providing it with some kind of endpoint, some kind of access point to the rest of the world that you can call for whatever purpose.
That's exactly right. It's all endpoint, API endpoint. API stands for application programming interface. Those are all interchangeable. It sounds complex, but all it means is it's a URL. So you would call something like my model 133.aws.com/12345/ and then you put in parameters. Like how you go to certain URLs, like websites with parameters, and then that modifies the website a little bit. So same thing here. You put in like a URL with parameters to the model. So you pass on, the customer asked this question, what's the response? And then you will get the response from the model as a number or as a text or whatever. That's all it means. It just means there's like a URL that your customer interface, user interface, your website can access the model, right? And then get a response and then integrate it into your user experience. So that's deployment. Step 7 is monitoring and feedback. So once a model is deployed, you need to constantly watch, not like manually, but need to set up systems to watch that it's performing well, right? Models tend to degrade over time. There's things like data drift, model drift. Those are technical terms, but in general, just think of it as like anything needs maintenance. Like a car needs maintenance, never going to be the same as it was when you bought it. Same thing with a model. Like over time, things are going to change, and you want to be proactively aware that they're changing rather than waiting until your customers are very unhappy. And then final step is iteration and maintenance. So like ChatGPT gets a new version every year or every couple times a year. You want to also be releasing new versions of your model because maybe you've thought of better ways of doing things, or processes have changed in your business, your customers' expectations have changed, there's new legislation that came out, etc., etc., etc. And also your monitoring of the model might communicate to you that it needs some maintenance, like your car would need maintenance. And so then you just cycle through that final loop of iteration and maintenance, and then you do the steps from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, from fine-tuning to evaluation, deployment, and back to monitoring and feedback and iteration and maintenance. So you just keep going through that. So that's all it is. Like it sounds complex, having Gen AI in your business, but that's all it means. The first 3 steps are done for you. Don't even need to worry about them. And then you just need to do that fine-tuning step and the remaining steps after that. And you can have Gen AI in your business and help optimize your efficiency, better service your customers, assist with innovation and things like that. So it's a very accessible tool for all businesses thanks to these foundation models.
Nice. So to recap those 8 steps quickly: data selection and prep, step 1. Step 2 is model selection and architecture. Step 3 is pre-training. You say that with a foundation model, all 3 of those things come ready to go. So the first 3 steps are done for you. In step 4, you can fine-tune to your particular business use case, maybe using your own proprietary data. In step 5, you evaluate to make sure that that fine-tuning worked like you thought it did. In step 6, you deploy it into a production system using the kinds of endpoints that we talked about so that whatever downstream application or user can make use of your new model. In step 7, you continuously monitor the model to make sure that it is continuing to perform like it was originally intended. And in step 8, you iterate and maintain to update the model, based on changes that happen in the real world, new words that come up, new foundation models that are maybe more powerful or smaller, more efficient that you could take advantage of for your particular application. Very cool. Thank you, Kirill, for that 8-step life cycle for foundation models. Hadelin, do you have any experiences with this? Anything you'd like to add?
Yes, definitely. Remember when I was telling you that Amazon Bedrock is like an all-in-one platform? Well, it's almost an all-in-one platform for these 8 steps. In fact, in Bedrock, you can do most of these steps except step 3, actually, because you already have the base models that are pre-trained, the pre-trained LLMs, for example. But then you can definitely do data prep. Well, actually, data prep, you would do it with some other services of AWS. But you can definitely do, for example, fine-tuning, which is something I did in a lab with our students recently. We did something super cool. We took an existing, pre-trained LLM, which was actually a llama model by Meta. And we took some extra medical data that we actually took from Hugging Face, the AI community containing tons of data sets and models. So we took this data sets of medical terms, tons of very, very advanced medical terms in this data set from Hugging Face that, the pre-trained LLM would not know much about. If you try to talk with the pre-trained LLM about these very advanced medical terms, it wouldn't be able to really have an advanced conversation with you. However, so we took that data set and then we fine-tuned that pre-trained llama model from by Meta to augment in some way its knowledge. We add those layers that as we talked about previously, these extra layers of knowledge that was provided from the data set. And then the fine-tuning took, a couple of, dozens of minutes, because it's actually a long process. We're kind of retraining the model without touching the inner layers, let's say, but we are kind of adding extra layers of knowledge. So it's in some way some extra training. And so that's why it took a little while. But after the training, after the fine-tuning process, well, the fine-tuned llama model by Meta was completely able to talk with us about some very advanced medical terms. I remember, and that was some of the other steps of that life cycle that I did during this lab. Well, we evaluated the model by asking, for example, what are bursitis, which is an advanced medical term, and some other very advanced medical terms, and it was perfectly able to talk with us about those very advanced medical terms. And so in some way, basically, eventually we built some kind of chatbot doctor, which was really cool.